Welcome to my library, dear guest. My name is Ko, and I will be your storyteller. Today, we will be reading 2 stories. Short disclaimer, this video will be a little shorter in commentary and story length. I am in the middle of moving and unfortunately do not have as much time as I usually do. However, I still hope you enjoy. Let us get started with story number 1. Story number 1. Bully whines that nobody likes his character. By the author, NoCloud7275. This story happened in an online game I played on Roll20. The group was really nice as a whole and the DM was great. But no group is perfect, and our problem player came in the guise of our fighter. See, our supposed lawful good fighter's player had taken the knight background and had chosen to have a squire. Problem was, he would bully his squire relentlessly to the point of abuse. I'm talking insulting him, eating his rations, slapping him upside the head randomly, making him sleep outside, making him carry all his things, etc. But the worst part is that every time Fighter would do something like that to his squire, he would laugh and grin at the rest of us. We were playing with webcams on, as though he had just made a hilarious joke and expected us to laugh, which no one ever did. Our characters would do what we could to be nice to the squire, but Fighter would get angry when we did this, saying that only he could interact with him because he was his squire. This bullying made all of us uncomfortable, and we called him out on it both in and out of character, asking him to stop, but he'd just say that it was just a joke and just a game, and that this character was good aligned, so that made it okay somehow. He'd lay off the bullying for a couple of sessions whenever we'd call him out, albeit whining that he guessed he just wasn't allowed to play his character anymore, but it would always start up again later. All of the rest of us players agreed that if it happened again, we would take action against him in character. One session, after we'd spent the previous 3 exploring some ancient ruins, Fighter had acquired a flame tongue, which had been identified by our wizard. Fighter immediately says as we exit the ruins that he wants to test the new weapon on his squire. At once, all of our characters tell him that anything he did to his squire, we do to him back. Fighter whines out of character, saying it's just a joke and to let him play his character, but we're insistent. Fighter then switched in character and says we're all jealous that he's a noble and we're not, and then challenges any of us to a duel to the death for his squire, saying, "That way it's fair and you guys aren't ganging up on me." This wasn't fair, as most of us were playing squishy casters, and knew we wouldn't be able to take him one-on-one, especially since he'd acquired a powerful weapon, and he knew that. It was an attempt to intimidate us. Our group's paladin, however, immediately attacked the fighter. The exchange went something like this.
What the hell? Why are you attacking me?
I'm not attacking you, he points to the squire. I'm defending him. What followed was our lawful good paladin almost dying in the process, but laying the smackdown on our lawful good fighter and knocking him unconscious. Fighter freaks out, turning off his webcam and saying it wasn't fair. We were bullying him. Yes, he of all people actually said that. That he didn't have to give away his squire because they hadn't shook on it, while also demanding the DM retcon what just happened. When none of us budge, he simply swears at all of us and leaves the game. The squire went on to become the paladin's squire, and eventually a fully statted out NPC who took the same oath of devotion Paladin did. TLDR, Fighter bullies his squire and gets mad we don't like it. You know what's funny? It explicitly states the following in the night background for D&D 5e. Feature: Retainers. You have the service of 3 retainers loyal to your family. These retainers can be attendants or messengers, and one might even be a majordomo. Your retainers are commoners who can perform mundane tasks for you, but they do not fight for you, will not follow you into obviously dangerous areas such as dungeons, and will leave if they are frequently endangered or abused. And that's that. I'm not going to put the blame on the DMs, since you don't ever really wish to take away a player's background feature. Plus, the player and the DM could have agreed on the Squire not leaving because of abuse beforehand. But this would have still been a good way to end all this early and give the player consequences for their actions. In the end, though, it all still turned out alright. The fact that the fighter's Squire became the paladin's instead and followed in his footsteps is actually really sweet, and a nice end to the story. Now, before we begin with the next story, let us thank today's sponsor, Apotheosis. Apotheosis is a new TTRPG developed by passionate and talented people in the community. Personally, my favorite part of any game is making and playing out characters, making them feel unique with abilities specifically tailored to them. Well, Apotheosis is making this easier than ever. You can be anything in this game that you want. And I mean anything. Apotheosis gives you the tools to create any character you can imagine. There is no limit to what you can do. If you can imagine it, you can play it. In fact, for those of you who like numbers, this game allows up to roughly 500,000 unique character builds, and that is only the estimate for builds that are different enough from one another to all have different playstyles. Let that number sink in. With this game, you will never run out of character concepts you can try out. Gone are the days of the dumb barbarian, gone are the days of the squishy wizards. For Apotheosis makes any build you wish to make a valid one. The character grows with you, and you can take any path you desire. The kind of magic you can use in this game greatly plays into that as well. With the spells and abilities given in this game, you can make any kind of caster, from Harry Potter to Edward Elric and beyond. And using it in creative ways is encouraged and rewarded. This does not only make casting classes more interesting, but combat as well. Speaking of, roll initiative. Apotheosis combat is fast, dynamic, and deadly. Any action you take will have consequences. Any wound can be deadly to you and the enemy, and every attack is different from the last. The enemy, your own character build, and the environment all play into these dynamic battles, allowing you and your group to always come up with new ways to strike down your enemy. This system keeps things interesting instead of making you choose between a few spells that all have a set damage range. The fights are cinematic and exciting. No more, I do 10 fire damage and then having to wait for half an eternity until you can go again. None of that. The damage you make and take all depends on the circumstances of the battle you find yourself in. And with enough creativity, well, you can take down even the strongest kind of monsters that stand in your way. If you are a fan of customization and cinematic battles in TTRPGs like I am, then click on the links below in the description. You can buy the PDF for $15 or the hardcover version for $40. Happy adventuring, dear guest. And thank you, Apotheosis, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let us begin with the second story. Story number 2. When one player's jealousy and apathy ruined a game and disbanded a group. By the author, Hey Miss Boo. This happened a couple of years ago, and only a few months into my first ever game of D&D. A friend of mine, henceforth referred to as Buddy, invited me to join a homebrew campaign that a friend of theirs was starting soon. Everything started out great. The first handful of sessions were everything that a new player could want. That was until Buddy started making blunt and somewhat unfriendly jabs toward the DM, and appeared bitter and aloof whenever we played. Eventually, the DM told me that Buddy had sent them a message asking if they were giving me preferential treatment. Personally, I never felt like I was ever receiving any kind of special attention, and the DM assured us both that they were treating everyone fairly and equally. Despite the DM's best attempts at reassuring them, though, Buddy remained skeptical, and so their attitude never really improved. Now, I've known Buddy since our mid-teens, and this was unfortunately familiar behavior. I'm fairly certain that they had some personal issues going on, which they often projected onto me. They would usually act this way whenever they felt I was receiving more attention from our mutuals than they were, regardless of how much I was actually receiving. The DM and I had quickly started to become friends by this point, so I was, and still am, quite certain that this is exactly what was happening here. Anyway, in one of the following sessions, our party had to flee an invasion and take refuge in a neighboring country/city. There were strict conditions of entry, and if we refused to comply, then we'd be arrested and taken to the prison mines to work. Even though we were low level and outnumbered by the guards, Buddy, whose character had been relatively sensible and rational throughout the campaign thus far, decided that they wanted to throw caution to the wind and fight this matter without consulting or warning the rest of our party first. They caused a massive scene and dragged our unwilling party into it. It ended with everyone, with the exception of my character, who had chosen to stay out of it and follow protocol, being arrested and taken to prison. The DM had assumed that the party would do as my character did, and I'm certain they all had intended to do so initially, so their plans and plots were completely derailed. And yes, Buddy claimed it's what my character would do to try and justify their actions. Since the party had been split in this manner and were unable to reunite for a few sessions, the DM decided to conduct my character's point of view through one-on-one sessions, so that my little solo adventure wouldn't take up everyone's time while the rest of the group kept to our regular schedule. After the party escaped and before I could reunite with them, the DM thought it would be fun to have them run into a fake version of my character, played by me, to set up the next quest. Everyone had a good time. Or so we thought. After the session, Buddy sent the DM a message basically saying, paraphrasing, "This was shit. I can't believe I woke up for this. The twist is obvious. I could have sat out of this game. What a waste of my time." Needless to say, this broke the DM's spirit, and the campaign was immediately and indefinitely cancelled. And despite trying to start a new campaign without Buddy, the group disbanded a few weeks later because the DM's heart wasn't in it anymore. The DM and I have since become great friends, and found another amazing group together, so something good came out of this at least. TLDR, a player thought that I was getting special treatment from the DM, following a repeated history of jealousy toward me, and began acting bitter and aloof during playtime before they eventually stopped caring about the game, derailed it, and made the DM feel bad about themselves. Okay, that last part, that is just unacceptable. Not much more to say about this in all honesty, but what this player had said to the DM was just vile. If you really just wanted out of the game, it could have been a simple, "I'm sorry, I don't think this is the group for me, but I hope you guys have fun." No attacking the DM and their campaign like this, especially when, at least from the author's point of view, the DM has done absolutely nothing wrong. But here too, it has a happy end, so that's good at the very least. That was it for today's story. Before we end it, however, I would like to thank all of you who were so kind and understanding of me skipping the video last week. Your comments were all really sweet and appreciated. Things are still very busy right now, but it should be better by sometime next week, and I hope to record a video there with less crunch time. Here's hoping. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed your stay and that I will see you again soon, for there are always more stories to be shared.